insists that there are multiple ways of knowing and that religious narratives exist alongside scientific ones and can even supersede them. I would have to say, I hope that I fall into the category of humanist. I know I'm not much of a theologian, but I would have to agree that I would be one of those people who would say that there are multiple ways of knowing and that religious narratives exist alongside scientific narratives and can even supersede them. But you got to be careful about what you mean by supersede them. That is to say, a religious narrative doesn't supersede a scientific narrative in the sense of saying, well, I'm not going to believe that science because God wouldn't want me to believe that science or something like that. But the scientific narrative, for example, that he propounds, one of the scientific narratives that he propounds is that the human mind is just a product of the human brain and there is no spiritual quality to it at all. In that case, I would say that's not really a scientific narrative. That's a pseudo-scientific narrative, and it really needs to be superseded by religion. But here I want to pause because as in so many of these cases and these stories that we review where the scientists will argue for the superiority of science over religion, often science goes entirely undefined. Often religion also goes undefined. But what even is science? He doesn't ever say. He says scientific practices, observation and experiment, the development of falsifiable hypotheses, the relentless questioning of established views, have proven uniquely powerful in revealing surprising underlying structure of the world we live in, including subatomic particles, the role of germs in the spread of disease, and the neural basis for mental life. Well, that last one, you have to say, well, that really depends on what you mean, but you see what he's saying is he's saying that science is kind of this thing that we do where we observe and experiment and we relentlessly question established views. That actually is not what science is. As a matter of fact, science often becomes an established view that refuses to be questioned and can go for centuries being wrong about some of the most important things in the world. In other words, science is a much messier business than he suggests here. But I would suggest that it's important to think about science in a different way. Science is not just a matter of test tubes and observations and experiments and falsifiable hypotheses, although these things are important. Science is a product of culture. What we think of now as Western science, for example, developed as a consequence of the nature of Western culture. That is, the Christian culture of Europe developed universities, developed hospitals, developed huge intertwining networks of publications and professorships and all these things.
The religion
and it provided ways of financing
is all about
science,
fiction,
of financing experimentation.
That frustrates.
Even now, for example, science is a cultural undertaking. Our culture devotes a great deal of resources.
Our culture is a
behavior. Investing in science, or
our
government investing in science.
Our environment.
Institutes, universities, hospitals, all kinds of
with a steering wheel.
Cultural organization is what makes and sustains science. Another thing that we need to say before we go too far in talking about these things is the kinds of debates that Professor Paul Bloom wants to have, and many other scientists want to have, are essentially what we might classify as debates about the nature of knowledge. That is, they're not trying to say there is no God or something like that. That's kind of a crude argument that is not.
Well, if you mention that, you will lose a lot of money.
When they want to have this conflict, or they want to kind of emphasize the conflict between science and religion. What they mean is some ways of knowing are better than other ways of knowing. And one of the problems with scientists like Professor Bloom is that they often, while they know a great deal, they haven't really thought very deeply about what goes on in human knowing or how human knowing works. And I would just say this before we go on to read some more of what Professor Bloom says here.
Experience.
I would just add that one of the ways they miss what real knowing is, what it is for a human being to know something, is that they miss that at the root of all knowing is a judgment
to their environment,
about
to their outlook.
Have my questions been answered or not?
The experience.
That is, all knowing comes down to asking and answering questions and then making a judgment.
Not asking questions.
Are my questions answered or not? And when we feel, really truly feel, yeah, my questions have been answered, I don't have any more objections to that. Like, for example, maybe you tell a child that the sun doesn't really rise, it's the spin of the earth that gives the impression that the sun is rising. The child may have all kinds of questions. Well, then what keeps the sun up in the air? And why do the moon and the sun not seem to go on the same schedule? And a whole bunch of other questions. But those questions are answerable, and if you can give a sufficient number of answers to the young person.
All races at Red Rock Park in the mornings. Mass Ascension Friday morning from Fox Run Golf Course at Red Rock Park. Balloon Glow and Indian dances at Red Rock Park Friday evening. The annual Illuminatia will be at Rio West Mall Saturday evening. Bring your cameras and enjoy the 35th annual Red Rock Balloon Rally, December 4th through the 6th Game Gala.
Only a promotion like the Call of Duty Black Ops 3 sweepstakes at Carl's Jr. has legal.